Welcome, everyone, to True Crime Paranormal. I'm your host, Josh Turner. This is TCP. Join us in the, well, I guess you'd say true crime reality. Would that be how we would say it over here? Because it is a Paranormal Roundtable, our other show. We say, join us in the real reality.
The real true crime reality?
This is the real true crime reality. There you go. And with me tonight is Anthony, my co-host from Paranormal Roundtable, and then I have Madeline with me.
Hello. And
last but not least, Rain is with us. You want to say hi, everybody?
Hi.
So this is this case here, and then what we're going to talk about tonight. Before we get into it, it's about Samuel Little. But before we get into it, I got to tell you, we have multiple channels, and not the least of which is Paranormal Roundtable. A lot of people know me from that channel, the podcast and the YouTube channel. They're two different things, but they're still one and the same, if that makes any sense. We don't do live streams, obviously, on Spotify, but you can get those on YouTube. If you go to Paranormal Roundtable on YouTube, you can get the live streams. You can get everything you get on Spotify and more. So if you would like to join us on Paranormal Roundtable, we are on pretty much every day but Saturday at this point. So Mondays, we have a call-in show, and anybody can jump on and retell their encounters. We have a panel. Tuesday nights is for the Patreon. The Patreon is a $10, $20, $30, $40, $50 tier. You can help the show or shows immensely by joining that. And right now we're doing Bigfoot and the Nature of Reality in all the 50 states. And then on Wednesday, we retell people's encounters on a live stream on the YouTube. And then Thursday is members only. That's $5, and it's you get either a live stream or you get a pre-record. And that is for the members only. And that is on Thursdays. So Thursday nights. And that's all of these shows except for on occasion, the lives will always start around 8:30. On occasion, they'll start earlier if we have something going on. Friday night, we always have a guest. It's a pre-record. That starts at 7. Okay, the pre-records are always at 7. And then Saturday night is where we're at tonight. This is True Crime Paranormal night. So it's at 7 o'clock. It's an hour-long show. Thank you for being here. And then Sunday, which is kind of our main show, and that is the live stream retelling people's encounters on Paranormal Roundtable. But we also have another channel, two others. One is Dead Zone Transmissions, and they're 5 to 10 minute long short episodes. And that is my wife Nellie's channel. And that is her passion project, and that's what we call it. And it's the Dead Zone Transmission. Go check it out. It's on YouTube, and I believe it's on TikTok and a few other.
Yeah, it is on TikTok. Really cool stuff. I love it.
Yeah,
get you some delicious spooky stories.
Yeah, so go check that. Go check out Dead Zone Transmissions, and then what else do we got? We have Random Files. Random Files is divided into two shows: the real Random Files on Rumble, and then the more tamer version on YouTube, which is the Random Files, where we talk about everything from geopolitics to economics, investments. We talk about history, science. There's no telling what we're going to come up with. It's really random. And so geopolitics, some of the headier stuff, we put it on Rumble. So we say whatever we got to say. So here we are tonight on True Crime Paranormal, and we're talking about Samuel Little. A lot of people don't know who this guy is. And he is literally, quite possibly, the most prolific serial killer in United States history. Some people say he killed over 100 people. He says he lost count, but at least 93.
Yep, and 60 of those were confirmed.
Yeah, and so 60 of them were confirmed. But by his own admission, there could have been more that he just, he didn't say or whatever. A lot of times that happens with these people. But this guy, one of the things that gets me about him is his ability to recall, And I wouldn't say he's the most prolific serial killer that we know of, because there's a couple down in South America who will give him a run for his money. And we're not getting into those tonight, but there's some pretty bad ones down there. And then there's Andrei Chikatilo, in Russia. And that's just off the top of my head. I'm not even looking this information up. I just know that there's some killers that can give him a run for his money. But Samuel Little was, he was an African American, I don't usually use that term because most of my friends are like, I'm not African American, I'm black. So you can call him black, you can call him African American, I don't know, whatever. But the guy, he did these things, and he was just a weird guy. And then you had this woman, Jillian Lauren, who profiled this dude, and her husband was the lead guitarist for Weezer, I believe. And so, and I think he was the lead guitarist. But anyway, I know he was in the band Weezer, and then she ended up doing a show like on Netflix where she was interviewing this guy. And I happened to catch part of it. I don't think I watched it all. And it was intriguing. I was watching this guy and him recalling these murders like somebody just recalls like going to a restaurant and how tasty a dinner was there. Or, oh, they had really good key lime pie. It was just nothing to this guy. And his preferred method of unaliving these women was strangulation. And so I just, a despicable character, but we're going to get into it tonight. So what do you have for us, Madeline, about this guy? What do you know about this guy? Tell me.
Yep. So he went by Samuel McDowell Little, sometimes Samuel McDowell or just Samuel Little. He was born on June 7th, 1940. His mother, whose name was believed to be Bessie May, she was a prostitute, and she gave birth to him at 16. Pretty much just abandoned him. He was raised primarily by his grandmother, lived in poverty his whole life, moved around a lot, but primarily grew up in different parts of Ohio. So his killing spree began sometime in the 1970s, and his last known killing was in 2005. So that's basically a 35-year span. I mean, that's just mind-blowing. He essentially made a career out of being a serial killer, and he was believed to have operated in at least 14 different states. And like we said, he had 93 victims, 60 were confirmed. So, yeah, he lived a very transient lifestyle, which helped him get away with it for so long. And also he picked women who were prostitutes, who were, homeless, women he came across in bars, clubs. Many of these women were on drugs. So a lot of the times, well, not a lot of the times, because very few women survived encounters with him, but the ones that did, unfortunately, cases would end up getting dismissed or he would serve very little jail time because, again, these are very marginalized women who didn't really make the most reliable witnesses, and especially when you look at the time frame of when these crimes took place. I mean, back then there wasn't forensic evidence the way there is now, and sexual assault cases especially just weren't taken as seriously as they should have.
Yeah, and that happens quite a bit. We've seen that with other killers who just barely get away, like Dahmer in particular. He's one that always shocks me, the 18-year-old Dahmer with a body in a trash bag, and he tells the police when he gets pulled over, well, I'm taking this trash out to the dump, whatever. And they're just like, okay. They shine the light, they see it, and then they just walk off. And, yeah. So what do you know about this guy? What can you tell us, Rain?
Well, he also was arrested, over 100 times. He had a long rap sheet from anywhere from burglary to violence to he was actually arrested for the unalivings and accused and tried at least twice that I'm finding, and both times acquitted until finally in 2014 he was convicted for the three women in LA: Audrey, Guadalupe, and Carol. And so finally, when he was not acquitted, it was like justice for not only those three women in LA, but for all the women that he had unalived during this 35 years. And there's some victims that are still unidentified, sadly. And there is just trauma everywhere. All these people are just left with holes not knowing what happened to their friend, not knowing what happened to their loved one all these years. And, like kind of what Madeline had touched on, with it going on from the 70s, back then there wasn't really phones and cell phones and things like that. So maybe if, one of your friends you never saw again, you'd think, oh, they just moved or whatever. And so when he finally did get to telling the truth with the FBI, because at first he was adamantly denying this. And like she said, another reason why was because the DNA evidence just wasn't there back then. So when he finally did get pinned with the DNA evidence that was undeniable, and he was starting to have some moments of truth with the FBI and the way that they approached him in the interrogation videos as they were going in there and kind of joking around with him like he's their friend. One of the investigators said, sitting across from him makes me feel like I'm sitting on a porch having a glass of iced tea with a man recalling his life. But it was a twisted and dark life. He was speaking in these interrogation videos as if it was just fond memories for him. He was talking about it like he was speaking about being at a baseball game or going to a nice dinner. He didn't sound to me like he had any remorse. And if any kind of emotion was coming out of him, it seemed like it was enjoyment. He was laughing and giggling at times. He had even mentioned that his victims to him was like plucking a grape. And so once he finally started to admit to everything, the amount of details that this 70 something year old man could remember from the eye colors, what they were wearing, what they ate, what they said, conversations they had. He just had so many details that is just strange. He just even he would even go ahead and get into such details about what he did to the bodies and where he left them. 93 he could recall perfectly. And so finally, when the FBI and the police are realizing that there's so many women, they ask him if he could start painting these portraits. And so, anybody, if you want to go out there and start looking into this yourself, you'll see these haunting images of these victims, these haunting colored images that he had drew from his memory of these victims, to the point where some relatives knew that they had a family member missing and they saw the portrait and they were able to identify some of them, and some of them are still, like I said, unidentified today.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Rain, his confessing to these murders over time had nothing to do with remorse at all. And in a documentary that I was watching about him, it was a big part of it was, okay, I will help you with identifying these other cold cases as long as you don't pursue the death penalty, because he already knew he wasn't going to get out. And his reason for stopping the killings was only because he was getting older and he knew he just couldn't do it anymore. I mean, when he was caught, it was on an unrelated charge. It was a drug charge. They found him in a homeless shelter in Kentucky, and then he was extradited back to California, and then that's how they were able to get a match with the DNA on one of the cases. I believe it was Carol Alford, where his DNA matched the person who had killed her. And so again, it had nothing to do with remorse. It was simply just to keep the death penalty off the table. And in a way, it gave him this notoriety that he really desired. Upon listening to some of the interviews, they were obviously, buttering him up to get him to talk more and just thanking him for his time and, saying that what he's doing is a huge help and it's really, been a big help to their investigations. And you can hear in his voice, he was just like, oh, really? I'm worth something to these people? I thought I was a worthless thing. Like, you couldn't hear it in his voice just how proud he was. And it, like I said, it had nothing to do with remorse or getting justice for the families. It was for this weird, sick pleasure he had because he figured, okay, I'm too old to keep committing these crimes. I'm caught. I'm not getting out of jail, but hey, at least they're not gonna, hit me with a death penalty. So it gave him a sense of notoriety and he got to relive it because, you're in prison, you're isolated. So this was kind of like an outlet for him to relive these horrific murders. And one thing that I found interesting when I was reading up on him was that he absolutely did not want to have the label of a rapist because to him, he just, even in prison culture, that's something, there's like a hierarchy and obviously rapists, sex offenders that's at the bottom. So to him to be labeled as a rapist was a blow to his ego. He liked the idea of being known as the most prolific serial killer in America. That was a title to him that held weight. So this was obviously very self-serving. While it did help give a lot of victims and their families answers, again, it was not because he suddenly had morals towards the end of his life.
One of the things I think about this guy too, like it was mentioned before we started recording, we were going over this case. He was a very unattractive guy. And he wasn't somebody that these women would look at and go, oh, he's hot. Let me get and jump into bed with this guy. Right? Like, I mean, just when you look at him, and so there seems to be some sort of element of like deception that he used. And that's pretty much across the board, but in a deeper way. And this is one of the reasons why I chose to profile this guy. And I think that we all kind of agreed. He had something going on and he was able to deceive these women somehow. And like he did pick weaker targets, but he had women that would travel with him and even like, I guess like accomplices, right?
Yes. So he would, because again, he lived a very transient lifestyle. The women that he traveled with, they were basically partners in crime. So the way they would be able to live and eat was by, petty theft, like writing bad checks, fraud, things like that, robbery. The women that he traveled with, they really had nothing to do with, nor had any idea that he was going out and committing these murders. Because, when you're living life on the road like that, committing like these type of petty crimes, and let's say your partner just goes off for a few hours, they figured, oh, he's probably just out hustling or hooking up with some girls, when in fact, he was out committing these murders. And what was really disturbing is he would go find a victim, murder her, then just go back to whatever motel he was staying at with his companion and just, eat, laugh, joke, like nothing, like he just finished strangling a woman to death and he would just kind of, it didn't faze him. He could just flip a switch like that and just go back to being a normal person. And when you consider, again, a lot of times, prostitutes operating at night or being in bars and nightclubs at night, there's drugs, there's alcohol involved. So obviously, you're not going to have the best judgment or perception when you're in an altered state of mind. And because he was, described by, a few of his survivors as being very charming and social, and predators like him also, exploit, being able to look just harmless enough to let people bring their guards down, especially when you mirror someone's behaviors and kind of act like, oh yeah, look at all this we have in common. And once he could see they were starting to let their guard down, he would immediately kind of push for them to like, hey, let's go for a drive, or I'll give you a ride home, or I'll go get you something to eat. Like, he was very quick to try and isolate them and get them alone. And one thing that was very just, blindsiding for the few women that did survive him was just the immediate switch. There was no long escalation from him going to, oh, this nice, charming, funny guy to like this violent. It was just like at the drop of a hat. Like as soon as he would get them alone, it was, a completely different person.
Yes. And, thinking of him and leading up to when the unaliving started happening, you have to realize the time period in the span of how long this went on. So, Madeline had mentioned he was born in 1940 to a young mother who never raised him, who wasn't around. Now, thinking of this time period, this is like a very, you know, stressful time in the United States because you're in the middle of a World War II going on. And then when the war ended, he was still little, young. But then you have the boomers, right? And so you have all these families and the husbands coming back from war and they're starting their lives. And you have the 50s when he grew up, where it was a time where the man would go to work and the wife would put her makeup on at home and clean the home and have a nice warm meal ready for her family, and it was a very structured family dynamic where nowadays, divorce is very, very common. Back then, not so much. So he never had a normal upbringing. He was, raised with the grandparents, and I'm sure that, they try to do the best they could, but he he was not an only sibling either. The mother, kept getting pregnant and having, more kids. And so he started also getting in trouble from a very young age. And it was to do with violence. He wanted to be a professional boxer. That's what he wanted to do. He lost his first fight and then he threw his gloves away, supposedly, and went on to booming around the country and living the life he did. But then you have to see, okay, so the 50s, the 60s, he's kind of being coming who he is, and then you have the 70s. And one thing that Josh had mentioned when we covered the Gypsy Rose case is he had said it's a very sick society. How a girl, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, can get out of jail and get millions of followers, and she had literally unalived her own mother and been a big part in it. So it's a very, very sick society. So you have the 70s where you're having the discos and the feminism movement and the burning of the bras. And so you have, stemming from pop culture. You have the music industry, and, famous lyrics would be do a little dance, make a little love, get down tonight. And so it was putting, this idea in women's and men's head that it's okay to go out and sleep around and do drugs, and the hippies movement and Woodstock and all this is going on. And so that's why he was able to get all these women, because it was normalized that it's okay to meet someone and go have a one night stand. Some of the women he would meet at bars, some of them he would take on dates. And then some of them would be, and what I'm finding, I think the majority of the victims were prostitutes. And so he picked a group of marginalized women, and with the DNA technology not being there, and his choice of unaliving was strangulation. So that led to a lot of misidentification of victims, and some were ruled accidental and overdoses.
Yeah, and a lot of times where he would dump the women's bodies were in very remote places, like wooded areas, abandoned buildings. And he really just saw his victims as just objects, like you mentioned earlier, Rain. In an interview with investigators, he bragged about how he wouldn't get caught and how sometimes he would just go back to the same city, and he would be like, yeah, sometimes I'd go back to the same city, just pluck me another grape. How many grapes y'all got on this vine? Like, just completely dehumanize these women and just to him, it was just a means to get what he wanted out of it.
You know, it's crazy to wrap your head around the fact that this guy got away with this for over 30 years. That's an entire career that he made out of unaliving these women. And one of the interesting things that he said was that one of the major deciding factors in his choice of victim was not even necessarily whether or not he was physically attracted to them, to their faces or their bodies, but specifically he would look at their necks. If he was attracted to their necks specifically, then that was his target. Like within this marginalized group of women, he would pick them out based on like this weird sexual fetishization of their female neck.
One of the things I think about this guy, and it's, man, there's a lot of negative things to think about him, but here on the show, we've kind of gotten in the habit of picking out these demons that that are, kind of, focus. These guys seem to have something. One in particular, like that comes to mind for me, is in the Goetia. It's the 59th demon. And he's a marquis. He's considered a marquis of hell. I'm going to tell you who I think he is. And he's actually the one that actually got them all hemmed up. And he goes by different names. He goes by Arias. Like if you look up the Ars Goetia, the 72 Goetians of the Lesser Key of Solomon, these are the demons, which really they're archons, is what they are. The difference, it's not really demons. Demons are from the Nephilim bloodline. And folks, let me tell you something. There's a difference. These archons each have legions underneath them. And this guy has 30 of them underneath him. And he also goes by a name Orneus. And I can tell you what I know about this guy. And the reason I think it's that he is the one behind a lot of these, he is known as get this, Orneus is known as a vampirizing demon. And in the Testament of Solomon, he calls him that. He says, Solomon, he's described as an annoying vampirizing demon. He's depicted as a lion riding a horse with a snake's tail, and he carries snakes in his hand, right? Now think about this. Before I get further into it, and I tell you why I think this is the guy, it's because Samuel Little once admitted that he was in a theater and when he was a child. And this is when he was interviewed by, at the time her name was Jillian Lauren Schreiner, whatever. And actually, that's the bassist for Weezer. For those that are like, oh, that's not the lead guitarist, that's the bassist. There it is, it's the bassist. All right, so I got it wrong. And she's had her own weird life. If you know anything about Jillian Lauren, it's really weird. She's now divorced. In October of 25, they got divorced. But it's a really weird thing that happened to her because she ended up getting shot by the police. So, it just, there is something that follows this guy too. There's a few different things there. I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of stuff, but focusing on this Orneus or Arias, I'll tell you why I think that this is him, because Samuel Little says in that interview with Jillian that he watched a movie as a little child. He said it was back in the day, they used to have these double features, these horror movies, whatever. Mm-hmm. And he goes in there and he watches this movie, and there was this giant snake in one of these movies. And who knows what movie it is. It's probably lost to time. But it was strangulating a woman, like in the jungle. And he thought that was so cool. And he got, off on that. And he thought, dude, that's what I want to do is just, And so I'm sitting there watching this interview and I'm thinking, this is crazy. At the time, I didn't put two and two together, but knowing what I know about the Goetian archons, this is one of Orneus's powers, is strangulation. He has strangulating powers. And think about that. And the snake, he's part snake and he carries the snakes in his hand. And he's the lion. He's also this ferocious predator. He's a ferocious predator, and he rides around on a horse. Now, what does the horse represent? I'll tell you. That's his transportation, so he can move faster, right? So he rides this really fast horse. What did he do? He rode around in a car going crisscrossing the country back and forth, plucking grapes, strangulating them like the snake that he saw when he was a kid. See, here's my thought, and this is my theory, folks, and follow me what I'm going to say on this. I think Hollywood is sick. I think it's twisted. I think it's completely vile and evil. It's a den of serpents itself. It's run by the worst people on the planet, in my opinion, right? And then they put out these movies. And who's to say that they didn't put these movies out there to encapsulate an impressionable young mind? How many of these other killers may have watched these movies and subconsciously, not even, this guy had a good memory, though. He remembers everything. He remembers his childhood. He remembers everything. So he remembers this. But how many of these killers may have just saw something in passing, and then later on it triggered something, and then they jump on it, and then that becomes, a habit, something bad. Because I am thoroughly convinced that the wickedness of, and not just Hollywood, but the media in general, which is run by one of the arms of, I'm going to say this, there's 6 families, but one in particular is very involved. And I think that they put curses on these movies, just like these people put curses on the drugs so that you'll become more into the drug.
And I've heard about curses in corn, we'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, movies are the perfect medium to deliver certain curses, because one of the really effective ways to deliver those things is through a combination of visual imagery and like audible frequencies, but specifically like the rhythm in which those sounds are delivered has a very high impact too. So like movies, they combine the right images, the right music, the right sounds, everything. So it's all there.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think about this with Orneus, I think that the energy stealing, the blood, all of these things that these entities are into is taking life, and I think that this guy, his strangulating ways, was a way for him to suck the energy out of these people. I mean, that's what it's all about. It was that, and I think that when he said that in that interview, that he was a child, and that's what he remembers about, like that snake taking that energy. And the snake is oftentimes depicted as, striking people and poisoning them or choking them, because it's a serpent, right? And it is one of the things, it goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, right? Well, there was a guy that came on our show, and I don't know how many people remember this, but he was on our show. He was a guest, and his name was Alex Monte Kanawati. And Alex was a film director.
Yeah, he made Return to Babylon.
Return to Babylon. You remember that? And this was it was a movie about Hollywood, and they were going back. They were shooting it in black and white, and he was a guest on our live stream, and he was a Hollywood film director, and they captured something interesting. Whenever these people were doing, and Jennifer Tilly she starred in it, and they did a whole documentary about it too. And these people's faces looked distorted, warped, almost demonic. And when you see the pictures of these, I've talked to him on the phone, and Nellie's good friends with him, and he has actually shown us like more in depth than we just showed on the show. I've seen them all, and I've watched the film, and I've seen the documentary or whatever. It's crazy when you look at the stills when these people were jumping up and down doing stuff, and they would stop. Their faces were completely demonic. I mean, they look like reptilians, some of them. And so you're sitting there going like, this is Hollywood. This is the viperism of Hollywood, if that's even a word. Is that a word? We're going to make it a word. Viperism, okay? Viperism, vampirism, whatever you want to call it. That's what these people are. I mean, they're like a nest of serpents, and then they send them out into the world, and it goes into your brain, which is connected to the controls the physical, but the spirit is completely inundated and punctured, because you have to have a strong spiritual foundation, to keep yourself, strong. And I think that what Hollywood does is it perforates that. Because how many times have you been watching a movie, and I don't want to get too far flung on here, but I got to make this point, and they start saying things that are just, are not correct. Speaking out against God, Christ, whatever. And then they say really bad, vile words, not just like cuss words, but like just bad things, cursing things that and you kind of go, well, I like this movie, I'm really into it. So you let that slide because you're really entertained. But then they take it further and they go further, and then it becomes sexually explicit, and then they're doing and saying things that you don't agree with at all, but you're still tolerating it because they've got you, you're hooked, and you're further into it. That's what they do. That's literally what they do. So it didn't surprise me when Alex made this movie and he was shocked to see these demonic faces on there. And he goes, I was really surprised. I said, I wasn't. I mean, I wasn't there with them when they made it. It was like in, 2000, early 2000s, mid 2000s, whatever. And then there was a documentary, I think, that came out in like 09 or 10 or something like that. You got to go back and watch the show. It's on Paranormal Roundtable. But I couldn't, I just could not believe, that I can't believe that people don't make the connection. And then you got this demon, which I think, or Archon, which I think was directly linked to this guy. And I think it was Ornius. I really do. Or Orius. There's different ways to say his name, but it's the same thing. I mean, it all comes out in the wash, I mean, another way to say his name is Oriax. That's the Greek. Like there's a Greek, the way to say it. There's a Hebrew way to say it. And Ornius is another way to say it. But here's another thing he does. He has targeted strangulation. In particular, he strangles men who have a strong, often illicit passion for women born under the zodiac sign of Virgo, which is weird because he's really into astrology too, is what it says. He resides in the sign of Aquarius and specifically attacks those who fall under this sign. Get this. He attacks people vampirically at sunset, stealing their money, food, and life force. He drains the life of the young by sucking on their thumb. And it says, if his victims do not fall asleep when he prefers to strike, when they're asleep, right? He transforms into a beautiful woman to seduce them before killing them. But he's a shapeshifter. It says Ornius can transform into a man. And he is described as craving the bodies of effeminate boys. And he likes to be a winged creature or a lion. And when it's human, and in his human form, he causes immense pain to those he touches. And his art of killing is strangulation. But it says that he is thwarted by the archangel Uriel. And supposedly he is descended from an archangel originally, like his lineage. See, these angels have a lineage. People don't realize that. And in the folklore, he's he's listed as the 59th spirit in the Ars Goetia as Oriax. But he will change also, it says he will change into a man to do the same things to women. So he's like, interchangeable sex-wise. And yeah, I mean, this is what I think. This is what we're dealing with, I believe. And I'm not saying that each one of these has an individual, because this one here could fit multiple serial killers. Right? But I mean, it just makes me, when I'm sitting here listening to you guys talk, and telling what he is, who he is, and how he did what he did, I'm sitting here going like, dude, this is, this goes back to what he said in that Jillian Lauren interview. That's just me. I picked up on that, and I was just like, dude, that's Ornius right there. Knowing what I know, because he's the one that got them all hemmed up, because he was draining the blood of Solomon's servant, one of his servants, and it was his son who was dying. So Solomon prayed and asked God to help him, and God gave him that ring. And through that ring, he ended up not only hemming him up, but he made them all go, and he made them get the others. He didn't actually get captured, though, until the 59th. He was the 59th one actually captured. Like, he brought the other ones, and then I guess he tried to bounce or something. And then they said, nah, bring your serpent, lion, whatever body over here, you know. But yeah, and then traveling fast on a horse. I mean, and this guy, he loved to be nomadic. And like you said, man, he would go and pluck the grapes, as he calls them. Sickening. It just absolute despicable, sickening, these people, who they are. Folks, I'm going to tell you something else. It's hard to sit here and listen to these people. The way they're so arrogant and braggadocious about what they've done. Yeah, you've hurt innocent people. You've hurt people who may not be so innocent. Whatever. You pick targets that are weak, you know, weak people, somebody who's a woman or a child, or in like John Wayne Gacy, somebody who's bound, who can't do nothing back to you, you know.
Yeah.
They trick them, and then they, you know, or Dahmer, who would give them drugs, and, you know, they would pass out, you know, then he would strangle them. That's what these people do. They target these weak people, and they attack these helpless people, they're victims, and they're victimizers, and they're predators. And they have these evil spirits attached to them and on them. And now remember this. This guy has 30 legions under him, right? When we covered the case of Gypsy Rose, right, we did a 3-part series, and we did it with Bigfoot Michigan Rob's channel, and we did it with Blondes and Booze on their channel. Go check it out. We were the number 2 episode. After it was Blondes and Booze and us, then BMR, and it was a 3-part deal. When we did our study on Gypsy Rose, one of the things I learned about Visago, right? Visago. And I think if I'm correct, he has 26 or 28 legions. You can look him up. I don't know. But what I've said before is none of these legionnaires that work for these guys have any individual names. Here's what I'm going to tell you, and let people who understand this listen to what I'm going to say. If you've listened to the show on Paranormal Roundtable, you have a good grasp of what I'm going to tell you. If you've listened enough, you probably heard the episodes where we did on the Friday night, where we always have a guest with Sean, right? Go back and listen to those episodes. We talk about the fractal soul and how each individual lifetime can be, you know, like a zip drive, and then it goes back to the main frame, you know, the main computer. Right? Each one of these, I believe, is a splinter cell, having their own everything, whatever, their own autonomy, but also being part of a greater whole. Think of like Soundwave from the Transformers. You know, he's got those cassettes that come out of him. And if you're a kid from the 80s, if you're a Gen Xer, they come out. There's Rumble, Ravage, Frenzy, Buzzsaw, Laserbeak. Yeah, you got all those, right? And yeah, those are still, though, they live inside of Soundwave, and he pops them out, and they're little pieces of him, little fractals, but they all have their own individual personalities. But you know their names, right? The difference is that there's nowhere that you can find any of the goetic demons' names that work for them. They just say, well, he has 28,000 legion. You know, that's how many legions he has. Each legion representing of a Roman legion, it's anywhere from 5 to 6,500 people, right? So same thing goes for these guys, right? Do the math, right? What is that, 180,000 soldiers? But all of those are nameless beings. But I don't believe that. I believe that they are all part of Orneus. Yeah. You know, 180,000 soldiers, whatever it is. He's got each one of those. They don't have their own autonomy, but they're capable of going and being him. You see what I'm saying? Because this is the question. I had somebody try to be snarky with me, and they said, well, only God is omnipotent. So if it's true that they exist, this is an atheist, right? And he was like, well, if it's true, how could these demons all be in different places? How could this one demon affect all these different people? And I said, because they have legions that work for them. And when Jesus confronts them, what do they say? They said, we are legion, we are many. And they're all speaking with one voice, but there's 1,000 of them speaking because, you know, the demoniac, you know, he had all of these demons on him. How is that possible that he had all these different demons? Because they were all pieces and part of possibly 1 or 2 or maybe 3 of the main archons, because these are fractals. People don't understand how that works. Folks, when there's an exorcism, they ask the demon its name. I'm almost certain that most of the time it is not the actual archon himself, it's one of his legionnaires. And those legionnaires there might be a pile of them. Who knows? But those legionnaires are like ticks, and they all pile on. Like when you ever take ticks off your dog, there's a bunch of them all clumped together. They're gross parasites. That's what these things do. Speaking of grapes, and so they all pile on, and they vampirize whatever it is that they're attacking, and then they're forced though to say the name of who or what they are. So when they say their name, I'm pretty sure it's not the main guy, but it's his legionnaires. So there's multiple Orniuses running around doing this because they're broken up into 30 legions. That's what people need to understand. They don't understand that, and there are so many of these guys running around doing this, but he is responsible for that. And so whenever they say the name of it, it's like if you were cornered, I've said this before, it's like saying what your house name is. Like I'm from House Stark or House Lannister. If you're a fan
or your clan or
yeah. I just was using that because a lot of people like Game of Thrones. Yeah. So if you're doing it, like, well, I'm a Lannister. You don't say, because you don't really have your own. You just say your house name. And so that's a lot of times that's what happens, and they'll be like, well, this is this particular demon, and I think it's an oversight on pretty much all of the different churches and all of the different religions, because they can't agree on the time of day, but they're not looking at how this stuff really works. They look at the end result of it and they go, well, this is what works, but they're not talking about how it works or why. That's important for us to know, because Jesus says in many different apocryphals, and he says do not have fear. In many of the Gospels, he says this, and I believe it's in the Gospel of Philip, if I'm not mistaken. You guys can look it up, but there's different Gospels that aren't in the New Testament, and he says that it's important to know their names because you can bypass them. Because if this is a matrix, this is a code, right? And these people that come out effed up, I'm sorry to say, but they're born beyond redemption. This guy has no redemption in him at all. He's an old man. He's proud of what he did. He is so proud of the devastation and destruction that he caused, being the sword of Ornius. Literally, that's what he did.
And when he talks about it, it's like reminiscing about the good old times, or about the golden years, the golden days, or the highlight of someone's life. Samuel Little, like he's not a particularly high IQ person. He's not the brightest in the bunch, and yet he seems to have this extraordinary ability, like almost a photographic memory, to recall his victims' names, their faces, and he could draw their faces from memory and exactly what he did to them, when it was, the year, the month, the location where he did it, and where he disposed of them. And to me, like the fact that if you listen to this person talk for 2 seconds, you realize this is not a very intelligent person, but yet he has this extraordinary memory. Like to me, that's evidence that that's not an ability that comes from within him. That it's, in my opinion, that ability comes from the demon that is living vicariously through him, because they do give their host certain abilities to recall their deeds, because the demon gets joy from carrying out those things. So they would empower their host to recall in vivid detail all of the things that they carried out in that demon's name. I think it's also why they are able to go on doing what they do for decades, because like they would protect that host so that they can continue to use it and live vicariously through it. It's like they want to experience the pleasures and the violence of the material world through human beings.
Another thing people don't realize is a lot of these women were living in sin. And, if you're not born again, if you're not, redeemed by the Redeemer, which is Christ, and I am saying this, and I'm not trying to get Bible thumpy here, I'm just telling you, this is the truth. When you pass away, it's not necessarily like, oh, you're just people don't realize this. They don't realize what happens. You get taken to these places of torment by these archons and their minions, and they're able to do these things to you because you don't have the protection of Christ. That's why you say the prayer that you say, Christ, come into my heart, save me from my sins. It's called the sinner's prayer for a reason, because you're redeemed. and you're entering into a contract with Christ, the Son of God, to protect you, save you, and you try to live righteously because he says, go and sin no more. And the past is the past, right? In this timeline, with this structured cube that we're living in, there's a timeline there you have to follow. And we'll get into some other stuff one day, but not tonight. But Jesus says, like, this is what you have to do, right? Well, once that is done, that contract is signed, sealed, delivered, you're good. And there have been countless people who I've interviewed who've had near-death experiences. They've literally died. My mother was one, and she actually died twice. So here's the crazy thing. And then she passed away in 2021 completely. But she died, and she called out to Christ because this archon was trying to take her to a place of torment. Not necessarily hell, because hell comes possibly later. And then some people say, well, hell's not really, it's Gehenna. And we get into that on the show. But the thing is, it is, at the end, hell is a place of torment, and it will be cast into the lake of fire. So these places of torment, why does it say that it will be cast into the lake of fire? Because in the end, God's going to destroy hell because there's no use for it. Those who cannot be smithed and saved, silversmith and saved, and they're basically burned out cells who have already been given over to the darkness. There's no redemption in them. They don't have any empathy, and they're just shells. And they've been used by these archons as vessels. People like Samuel Little. He's literally just like a non-participant, just whatever, non-playable character, NPC, who's a vessel for demonic activity.
He's just along for the ride, basically.
Yeah. I mean, he's going to be one of those in hell that gets cast into the lake of fire. I'm going to tell you, folks, I don't believe it at all that he has there's no redemption for this guy or any of these others. I mean, they don't feel they don't feel sorrow. And a lot of them, they admitted themselves that they knew there were more victims, but they're not going to tell you. They're going to take that with them to their grave. Why would you do that unless you are completely demonized?
Mm-hmm.
And by demonized, I mean, by these archons, these fallen, rebellious angels.
And like Maddie said, the only reason Samuel Little came forward and told the truth about who his victims were and what he did with them was because it gave him a sense of importance, a sense of value. Like he was, it was like his little 15 minutes of fame.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't out of any sort of concern or repentance or anything. It was just like fun for him.
And it was self-serving because, again, he was trying to avoid the death penalty, which didn't matter because he only served like a couple years in jail. I think it was December 30th of 2020 he died, like in his into his 70s.
And the only reason he stopped is because of old age.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did he pass away, Maddie? Do you know?
Don't know. I think he got sick or something. I'm not sure. Something to do with natural causes, but yeah.
They said it was something to do with him having diabetes and heart problems. And in one of the interrogation videos, he's actually saying about his heart. So it could have been like a heart attack or something like that. But nobody was going to revive him.
Yeah, thank goodness, because it's a waste of time. He's a waste of flesh. That's what he is. And these beings, they're a waste of spirit and whatever. But, well, that's all the time we have for tonight, folks. Thank you for tuning in. So, folks, we'll be back next week with part 2 and the conclusion with Samuel Little. And we're going to get into the victims and the trials and things and show you how the enemy takes care of their vessels like Samuel Little and the close calls. This guy got away with a lot of stuff for a long, long time. It's unbelievable how it's hard to fathom when you read about this guy and Chikatilo. He's another one, and then the Andes killer. I'm not going to get off into these other people because we're focused on this guy, but they killed an incredible amount of people and swathed a path of destruction like a hurricane. And it's just like it was nothing to these people. And it's nothing to these people because they're completely controlled by archon demons. And I'm going to tell you, there is something that keeps these people in the balance. It keeps them able to tightrope, to get away with this. You see this with Bundy. You see it with this guy, with Dahmer, all these people.
Yeah, it's an intelligence that doesn't come from them. It comes from the thing that is living within them.
It's unbelievable, these people. Anyways, folks, we're going to be back next week, and we'll talk more about this this person and the entities attached to him. All right, guys, thank you for tuning in to True Crime Paranormal. This is Josh Turner and
Anthony.
Maddie.
And Rain. I was pointing, and they were like, "What are you doing?"
I was like, what is it? Are we doing finger guns or what?
What is this?
Just picture it, folks.
Yeah.
Are we doing finger pew-pews? We don't want to mess up our algorithms to YouTube. All right, guys. You know what to do. Like and subscribe. We'll see you later. Good night.
Dark deeds, footsteps in the weeds. A body not breathing, what overtook them? I hear the voices crying from the other side. The pain whispered like a slow tide. Was it impulse or reversal? Did they snap or was it normal? What was done in the dark will be brought to the light. A murder at midnight. Never gave up the fight, but in the end it went toward the light. A mile mark, a sign of midnight crime, a quiet grave, a life taken away. Was it impulse or rehearsal? Did they snap or was it normal? Captured and tried, a criminal mind, thinking the body's no one to find. The darkness of a serial killer's mind as the gavel comes down. Guilty then you're found. Was it impulse or rehearsal? Did they snap or was it normal? Was it the voices in the head? Was it the echoes of voices? Was it isolation or a sick infatuation? Was it the monsters that visited that bed? What was it they said? Was it impulse or rehearsal? Did they snap or was it normal? Each one different but always the same. A monster and a game. Was it the thrill of watching life slip away? Or was it coward they crave? Was it impulse or rehearsal? Did they snap or was it this night.